verify the transaction using those keys, right? And he couldn't do it. So he's clearly not Satoshi.
I'm just going to hit you with this one, John. Who is Satoshi Nakamoto?
The monk here is Satoshi Nakamoto.
So you're going to show me that Satoshi Nakamoto is you?
Yes. Some people will believe, some people won't. And to tell you the truth, I don't really care.
I'm not in Bitcoin.
But your address
not in Bitcoin. I don't know anything about it.
First things first, in this episode, we're going to be picking up right where we left off, so I highly advise that you go watch the previous episode if you haven't already. Now that you're all caught up, let's do a brief recap. In our last part, we took a look at the general background and genesis of Bitcoin. First, we took a look at the influence for Bitcoin's creation from the cypherpunks and its geographic activism roots in California. We saw that Satoshi's online persona had hints of a British background in a variety of ways. From the usage of the term white paper to his British English and the encoded message from a UK newspaper, all of these hints seem to suggest that Satoshi was of British descent. We also saw that Satoshi had a very formal writing style to the point that he would idiosyncratically write as an academic on a casual basis. Leading up to Satoshi's disappearance, we saw his individual plea to WikiLeaks to not use Bitcoin. I highlighted this post in my last video, but I'd like to read through it in full to emphasize a point here. When the user R. Horning wrote, basically, bring it on. Let's encourage WikiLeaks to use Bitcoins, and I'm willing to face any risk or fallout from that act. Satoshi responded, no, don't bring it on. The project needs to grow gradually so the software can be strengthened along the way. I make this appeal to WikiLeaks not to try to use Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a small beta community in its infancy. You would not stand to get more than pocket change, and the heat you would bring would likely destroy us at this stage. What's ironic is that the WikiLeaks scandal actually fueled interest in Bitcoin, and despite what Satoshi said, Bitcoin thrived after this incident in 2010, and the price continued to climb and it continued to receive adoption. While many people portray Satoshi as this mastermind plotting every little detail, it's important to humanize him here. Just because something sees success doesn't necessarily mean the creator had perfect foresight. Hindsight is 20/20, but Satoshi made a logical decision to get out of the way of any oncoming problems from WikiLeaks at this time. This was a cautionary move specifically because he could not foresee the future. One final point I want to make in regards to our recap from the last episode is the observation that Satoshi's British background could have been put into place to throw us off the trail. While I cannot directly prove or disprove this, what I can say is that even if Satoshi used American English, he would have definitely still been a mystery to this day. Instead, you should question why this person would have any distinct writing style in the first place. Even if we could narrow down Satoshi to a very specific candidate, there's still plausible deniability here. For someone to prove that they were Satoshi, they would have to be able to provide the cryptographic signatures to move the coins from his untouched fortune. When it comes down to operational security, Satoshi used a fake name, Tor, and paid for a domain with a prepaid credit card, and that's really all he needed to mask his identity. As you'll soon see, with all other clues that are to come, either Satoshi wasn't perfect like every human being on the planet, or he was individually throwing us off the trail at every given opportunity. Now that we're all caught up, it's time to discuss the further implications of Satoshi Nakamoto's disappearance. The true identity of Satoshi still holds weight in a missing fortune of billions of dollars that have gone unaccounted for. Whenever the price of Bitcoin tends to spike to all-time highs, the Satoshi debate and investigation comes right back into the limelight. This is for a good reason, and even if you're not familiar with cryptocurrency or trading, in this section I'm going to lay all of this out for you in layman's terms so you can understand the implications of Satoshi's fortune. As mentioned in the previous part, Satoshi is believed to own a little over 1 million Bitcoin, and to this day, not a single one has ever moved since its initial testing. The only known movement from this fortune is the first Bitcoin sent from Satoshi to Hal Finney. For the record, there are only ever going to be 21 million Bitcoin mined into existence, and over time, the total number of coins in circulation will continue to shrink, thus making them more scarce and valuable. When I explained in the previous episode that Satoshi may have lost access to his keys, I need to explain how a mountain of Bitcoin could go missing. Controlling a Bitcoin wallet comes down to a pair of two cryptographic keys, the public key and the private key. This cryptographic private key is a 256-bit number that can be stored anywhere. You could have it on your computer, you could have it on a text file, or you could even write it down on a piece of paper. If at any point you were to lose your private key, you'd lose access to your Bitcoin wallet, and those coins would be lost forever. We know from Bitcoin mining analysis that one entity, starting at the Genesis block, was rewarded around 1 million Bitcoin. If Satoshi was doing this selflessly, you might want to question why Satoshi would pre-mine 1 million Bitcoin. If you were able to figure out what happened to Satoshi's keys, you'd be able to make a huge move in the cryptocurrency market. For example, if Satoshi lost his keys and you could confirm this in theory would remove 1 million from the supply permanently, and the price of Bitcoin could very well significantly increase. The fact that we will eventually run out of new Bitcoin to mine and that coins are lost daily theoretically sets up Satoshi's fortune to become an ever-appreciating asset that could be dumped onto the market at any given moment. If Satoshi were to sell all of his Bitcoin at once, you'd have 1 million new Bitcoin in circulation. This could cause a market correction larger than we've ever seen before. While this wouldn't be the end of Bitcoin per se, this would definitely be headline news all around the world. The fact that we have no idea what happened to Satoshi or his fortune only deepens the mystery. Now, will Satoshi ever sell his Bitcoin? This is quite literally the billion-dollar question. Some people might state that Satoshi can't sell because it would risk his personal safety from the government or legal trouble, and that is one of the main arguments I see. I could understand this argument in the early days of Bitcoin with the whole WikiLeaks scandal, but as things have settled, I should point out it's not a crime to make a cryptocurrency. The technology was new, and this is analogous to saying that it would be illegal to fly a plane over Los Angeles when planes hadn't been invented yet. Hal Finney played just as much a part in the creation of Bitcoin as Satoshi, and he cashed out with no problems whatsoever. Satoshi even said to Gavin, "Give more credit to the dev contributors as it helps motivate them." There have been a lot of people over the years involved with this open source project, so if there was some legal trouble here, then the Bitcoin developers would be in just as much hot water as Satoshi, to which there is none. There are countless other currencies around today where the creators are well known and many of them have sold off, and their projects are still going strong. So it's interesting that Satoshi Nakamoto still wants to keep his identity a secret. I can understand that the guy might not want media attention, but if it comes at the cost of redeeming billions of dollars, it might be worth it. Many conspiracy theorists might suggest that Satoshi doesn't need the money, but you should consider that the guy didn't even own an i5 or AMD computer in late 2010. Now you might be thinking, well, maybe Satoshi had an i7, and he didn't have access to an i7 processor either. Actions tend to speak louder than words here, and personally, I have a hunch there may be another factor that's preventing Satoshi from revealing his identity. One fear that gets passed around when it comes to Satoshi going missing is the possibility of him dumping all of his coins onto the cryptocurrency market at once. The only thing we can really say for certain is that if Satoshi sold a large amount of Bitcoin at once, the price would most likely go down. Generally, whenever a rare commodity floods the market, the price tends to crash, and to top that off, people use Bitcoin as a sort of gold standard to trade other currencies against it. Essentially, if it's a good day for Bitcoin, it's a good day for Ethereum, and vice versa. So if Bitcoin was to crash theoretically, you'd see the entire market go down in tandem. Some people argue that this could trigger some sort of chain reaction if enough Bitcoin was sold at once, but to me this personally seems like fear-mongering. The fact of the matter is, logistically, moving all of that Bitcoin to different exchanges and finding enough liquidity alone would make it almost impossible to sell everything at once. We'd see Satoshi selling from a mile away. Something else to consider is that Satoshi may have been on the run. We know he left the Bitcoin project quickly when the WikiLeaks scandal happened, so there could be a chance that Satoshi left his coins if something didn't go according to plan. Personally, I don't think it's likely that Satoshi would simply just lose his coins, as on one of the forum posts on Bitcoin Talk, a user by the name of VirtualCoin wrote, "Hello. If somebody is losing their wallet due to a disk crash or he's not able to get his coins back, is he? So every time a person loses their coins, they're lost forever? So the Bitcoin network will slowly shrink over time because there will always be people losing wallets?" Satoshi replied to this person and wrote, "Lost coins will make everyone else's coins worth slightly more. Think of it as a donation to everyone. If anyone was going to back up their private keys, it would be Satoshi. Keep in mind, we're dealing with a cryptography expert that could easily just encrypt his keys on his computer. It's far more likely, in my opinion, that something happened to Satoshi rather than him losing access to his Bitcoin. And if something happened to Satoshi, then something that needs to be considered is where such an encrypted laptop holding billions of dollars would be sitting right now." Another reason that comes up a lot in regards to Satoshi not selling any of his fortune is the belief that he made Bitcoin selflessly, but I personally think this is very unlikely. While many of the open source projects that exist are largely in part to benefit others selflessly, keep in mind Satoshi pre-mined Bitcoin, which seems to suggest that the end game was to profit. I honestly don't blame the guy, and I don't think many people would have a problem with this guy getting some reward for his work. In my opinion, if Satoshi were perfectly selfless, he could simply make a statement prior to his disappearance saying that he was burning the coins. I may just be a cynic here, but I personally don't believe that someone would forego billions of dollars and years of work for everyone else's benefit. If you wanted to make the argument that Satoshi just did this for the good of humanity, why not just donate that money to charity instead of burning it? For those that say that Satoshi would have to compromise his identity to donate money to charity, that's not actually true. Remember that I said cryptographic keys could be written on a piece of paper. So in this case, if Satoshi took the proper precautions, nobody would be the wiser if an anonymous letter showed up in the mail. So to summarize this section and answer the question of whether Satoshi will ever sell or not, I think it's highly unlikely. Some of you might say that Satoshi is truly playing the long game, but to counter this point, 85% of the Bitcoin in the world has been mined, and we won't likely mine the final Bitcoins until sometime around 2140. Even if Satoshi were playing the longest game in the world here, it still wouldn't require you to sell all at once. So this is truly puzzling as to why not a single Bitcoin has been sold. If you look at any surface level research on Satoshi Nakamoto, you'll see the name Dorian Nakamoto pop up a lot, so I feel like it would be worth discussing how this character in particular fits into this grand internet mystery. What often gets overlooked is what actually happened online at the time of Dorian Nakamoto's popularity. So with that being said, let's leave no stone unturned and go back to 2014. Dorian Satoshi Nakamoto lived a few blocks from Hal Finney and was the #1 suspect at one point with a media frenzy in March of that year.
She tracked him down. But first, Vanita Nair shows us how the man is disputing her report.
Okay, no questions right now. I want my free lunch.
64-year-old Dorian Satoshi Nakamoto emerged from his Southern California home Thursday and walked right into a media frenzy. Hours after Newsweek magazine claimed he was the mystery man behind Bitcoin.
I'm not in Bitcoin.
But your address
Not in Bitcoin. I don't know anything about it.
According to that article, Nakamoto is a model train buff who lives in a modest single-family home with his mother. When confronted about Bitcoin, he said, "I am no longer involved in that, and I cannot discuss it." The article triggered a full-blown game of cat and mouse through the streets of Los Angeles, with the media tracking Nakamoto's every move, using the Twitter hashtag #BitcoinChase. Eventually, the retired engineer ended up at the Associated Press Bureau.
Where did that come about?
Over a meal of free sushi, he continued denying he was the computer whiz worth an estimated $400 million. In fact, he said he hadn't even heard of Bitcoin until 3 weeks ago.
The main reason I'm here is to clear my name that I have nothing to do with Bitcoin, nothing to do with developing. I was just an engineer doing something else.
This isn't the first time the media has tried to unmask Bitcoin's founder. Other outlets have tried, but failed to identify the creator.
By all accounts, this guy is the face of Bitcoin in terms of what everyone thought a man by the name of Satoshi Nakamoto would look like. And that's just about it. As far as his full background, you should consider the guy was trained as a physicist at Cal Poly Pomona and was involved with engineering work later on. He had no background in cryptography, he doesn't write in British English, and the news reporter who broke this story decided to do so after a misunderstanding. Basically, when the reporter questioned Dorian on what he was working on in 2007 to 2009, he stated that he was working on a classified project that he could not disclose the nature of. Dorian didn't understand this was in reference to Bitcoin and was quoted in a Newsweek article stating, "It has been turned over to other people. They are in charge of it now. I no longer have any connection." This was enough to dox and ambush the man outside of his home with a media frenzy. While it seemed weird that what he was working on was classified, Dorian has since done quite a few Reddit AMAs in which he revealed he was working for Citibank. While it's interesting this guy was in the financial sector, the guy did have an alibi that would make it impossible for him to be working on the Bitcoin project, not to mention the fact that the guy didn't even have the skill set to create Bitcoin in the first place. Dorian was gifted a nice sum of money when this event took place as a sort of apology for the harassment and mix-up. And something to note is that this guy cashed out at Bitcoin's peak value, unlike another Nakamoto we know. I want you to keep in mind this article was released on March 6, 2014, and there's quite a bit more to this saga. Something I haven't mentioned yet is that the cypherpunk mailing list wasn't the only place where Satoshi advertised Bitcoin in the early days. Satoshi Nakamoto had another account on a website called P2P Foundation Forum, and this account was dormant for years. While Mr. Nakamoto had commented a few times, what's really interesting here is that on March 7th, the day after the article came out, Satoshi Nakamoto's account would reawaken and say the following: "I am not Dorian Nakamoto." While many people write off this message as being debunked, I honestly beg to differ. On September 8th, 2014, an admin on the Bitcoin forum by the name of Thamos made a forum thread that read the following. Today, I received an email from Satoshin@gmx.com, Satoshi's old email address, the contents of which make me almost certain that the email is compromised. The email was not spoofed in any way. It seems very likely that either Satoshi's email account in particular or gmx.com in general was compromised, and the email account is now under the control of someone else. Perhaps Satoshin@gmx.com expired and then someone else re-registered it. Don't trust any email sent from Satoshin@gmx.com unless it is signed by Satoshi. Everyone should have done this without my warning, of course. I wonder when the email was compromised and whether it could have been used to make the post on the P2P Foundation forum account. What's interesting is that right after this post went up, another post was made on the P2P Foundation forum account that wasn't the one that was being referenced. Edit. I was referring to the Dorian Nakamoto post. After I posted this, there was another P2P Foundation forum account post. That post that Thamos was referring to was long since scrubbed from the internet, and the only way to find it is to navigate cleverly on the Wayback Machine. That post reads the following. Dear Satoshi, your docs, password, and IP addresses are being sold on the darknet. Apparently you didn't configure Tor properly, and your IP leaked when you used your email account sometime in 2010. You are not safe. You need to get out of where you are as soon as possible before these people harm you. Thank you for inventing Bitcoin. You might be wondering what this post is all about, so let me give you the full context. The hacker that got access to Satoshi's email had a motive and sought to extort money out of the situation, resulting in a pay spin demanding Bitcoin in exchange for Satoshi's docs. The email service provider that Satoshi used deletes inactive accounts after a certain amount of time. Since we know Satoshi last used this email in 2011, it was wide open to this hacker, and all he had to do was re-register Satoshi's account. The post we read was one of the various things made by this hacker, all to drum up controversy around Satoshi being hacked and to drive more interest in his Bitcoin ransom scheme. This guy only ended up getting 1.5 Bitcoin, and the docs he claimed to have on Satoshi was actually an e-commerce order where someone else used Satoshi's email on the order. So good on the internet for not falling for this scam. The hacker posted 2 photos on Anon Images, one of which was the e-commerce order that I already mentioned, and he later went on to vandalize the official Bitcoin SourceForge project using the forgot password function. The other photo is the one I'd like to call your attention to, as it shows us the exact date that Satoshi's P2P Foundation forum account was compromised. This date is September 8th, 2014, which means whoever made that post in March wasn't this hacker, it was Satoshi. To me, it appears that Satoshi didn't want Dorian to take any further heat from the press, as he clearly wasn't involved with the project. This was an empathetic move on Satoshi's part to not cause someone else trouble just because his birth name happened to be the same as his pseudonym. While it took us a while to get to this conclusion, this could very well mean that Satoshi was lurking in the shadows in 2014, and this may very well be his actual final mark on the internet. In the final part, my goal is to tie up all the loose ends that I've hinted at in these past 2 videos. When it comes to the finale, I've tried to save some of the most interesting and obscure clues that I haven't seen discussed on YouTube. You can expect my full online persona of who I think Satoshi Nakamoto could be. I will also be tackling all of the most popular online theories as well, and with all of that being said, this is Barely Sociable. Have a good night.